Good morning. For those who are just joining us, it will just be a few minutes. We're going to give everyone a chance to sign in, and then we'll begin the presentation. Thank you. Good morning. For those who are just now joining us, we're going to give it about another minute just to let all of the other attendees join, and then we will begin the presentation. All right, good morning and welcome to the Vendor Pre-Solicitation Conference for the Mobile Data Video Recording Systems, Accessories, and Related Services, Request for Offer DIR-CPO-TMP-566. Just to go over a few housekeeping notes, you can change your audio by switching between computer audio and phone call. All attendees are muted for this meeting. Click the raise hand icon, or if you will, please click your raise hand icon to confirm that you can hear the audio. Awesome, I see hands going up. That's great. All right, and you can feel free to lower your hand after that. And then we ask that you submit all of your questions in the Q&A function in the meetings control. The chat may be disabled. It's unlikely that we're going to see questions in the chat. So again, please make sure that you submit your questions in the Q&A function. We will get to those at the end of this meeting. So feel free to maybe think about your questions as we go along, and you can save those for that time. And then the handout will be made available in addendums. And then, so just to introduce our speakers, we have Scott Wilson, who is the procurement lead. Teresa Williamson is the hub program manager, and Stephanie Harrison, she's the director for cooperative procurements. Just to quickly go over the agenda. So it's the request for offer. So the RFO overview, RFO contents, RFO scope, evaluation criteria, the term of the contracts, the schedule, hub, pricing sheet, and EIR. And then some general information, the bid stamp vendor information system portal or BIS overview, mandatory submissions. Then we'll take a little bit of a break. We'll come back to answer any questions, and then we'll close out the conference. And I'm now going to turn this over to Scott.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for our pre-solicitation conference. So to briefly go over the overview of the RFO, the purpose of this request for offer is to solicit responses from potential vendors to provide mobile digital video recording systems, accessories, and related services to the state of Texas, acting by and through the Department of Information Resources. And this is a rebid of previous RFO DIR-CPO-TMP-566, also titled Mobile Digital Video Recording Systems, Accessories, and Related Services. And just as a note, DIR will more than likely, or I guess will, make multiple awards from this RFO because we obviously expect to have multiple contracts. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide provides an overview. It provides an overview of the DIR cooperative contract program sales from fiscal years 2019 through 2022. The far left-hand column of the chart represents the different DIR channel types, or as we refer to as our customers. And as you can see, K through 12 consistently provides the highest number of cooperative contract sales, followed by local government, state agencies, then higher ed, then out of state agencies, and then finally the assistance organizations. And then the smaller chart below that is specific to mobile digital video recording systems and accessories and related services, uh, current and past contracts. And as you can see, in 2020, the sales were pretty good. 2021, they were down a little bit, but thus far in 2022, they really have picked up again. So, and then the little bar chart to the right of that is just a representation of those numbers as well. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this slide lists the different attachments and exhibits to this RFO. And while I will not go through every attachment in detail or exhibit at the moment, I will briefly read through this list in order. So attachment 1 is the sample contract for products and service contracts. Attachment 2, Appendix A to our standard terms and conditions. Attachment 3 is the service agreement template. Attachment 4, the master operating lease agreement. Attachment 5 is the master lease agreement. And then for the exhibits, Exhibit A is respondent information. Exhibit B, respondent history and experience. Exhibit C, contract marketing and customer support plan. And then finally, Exhibit D is the itemized pricing list. So please have I just want to mention real quick, please have a copy of the RFO in front of you, whether it's electronically or a printout. That way you can make notes and kind of follow along as we go. And also, please, while I'm thinking about it, please make sure to thoroughly read the RFO in great detail. So you were familiar with all of the due dates, requirements, and the processes. Next slide, please. And then continuing with the exhibits, we have Exhibit E, the reference form. Exhibit F, the respondent release of liability for reference. Exhibit G is the voluntary product accessibility template for all commercial off-the-shelf products, also known as COTS. This is one of our accessibility templates, known as the VPAT. Exhibit H is the PDAA, which is the policy-driven adoption for accessibility, and it's more or less a vendor self-assessment. Exhibit I is the historically underutilized business subcontracting plan, or hub form. And then lastly, Exhibit K is the EDGAR certification form. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. Okay, so term of contract for the contracts that will be negotiated associated with this RFO. The term of any contract award for this RFO shall be for 2 years commencing on the last date of approval by DIR and the vendor. Also, the contract will renew automatically in one optional 2-year renewal and one optional 1-year renewal under the same terms and conditions, unless either party provides notice to the other party 60 days in advance of the renewal date, stating that the party wishes to discuss the modification of terms or simply not to renew. Next slide, please. So this slide represents the anticipated RFO schedule of events. This is also listed a couple of places, I believe, or one place, I'm sorry, under section 3.3 of the RFO, but we will briefly go through it because all these dates are important. So December 9th, last Friday, we published the RFO on the Electronic State Business Daily, the ESBD. And then of course today is December 16th and 10 a.m. we're having the pre-solicitation conference. Then December 23rd is a very important date. At 5 p.m. that is a deadline for submitting your questions to the RFO or whatever questions you might have. which those shall be posted or should be posted in the vendor VIS, but we will cover that in later detail, or in more detail a little later. Then moving on, January 13th, 2020, that should be 23. January 13th, 2023 at 5 p.m. That is the estimated response date for us to get the answers to all the questions. And, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Yeah, estimated response date to the questions received. And then January 31st, 2023 at 2 p.m. That is the deadline for DIR to receive all vendor references. And it's also the deadline for submitting RFO responses. So obviously that's in bold because that is a very important date. So January 31st, 2023, the deadline for vendor references and deadline for submitting your RFO responses. And then thereafter, February 1st, 2023 until completed, we will begin the evaluation of the responses and conduct any oral presentations or anything that might be needed at that time. So next slide, please. So this slide goes into greater detail regarding the evaluation criteria. So section 4.1 of the RFO, titled Evaluation of Responses. Some important notes to make here. Incomplete response packages will be rejected. The financial review and HSP review are on a pass-fail basis. Failure to provide a DUNS number may result in your response being disqualified, and the DUNS number is part of Exhibit A, the respondent information. And then lastly, only responses that receive the passing or a passing grade will proceed to the next evaluation phase. Then moving on, RFO section 4.2. This is a really breakdown of the evaluation criteria. So the product and related services pricing, which is Exhibit D, that will make up 40% of the score. And then respondents contract marketing and customer support plan, that will represent 30% of the scoring. And then lastly, respondents history and experience, this will also likewise represent 30% of the scoring. Next slide, please. All right, so now to cover the exhibits in a little greater detail. So Exhibit A to the RFO, as I mentioned, is the respondent information. And this form must be filled out in its entirety and signed by an officer or agent empowered to contractually bind the respondent. Complete canceled contract references if applicable. Then Exhibit B, this is the respondent history and experience. Respondent must provide a detailed response to each question detailing the respondent's history and experience in providing the products and services being proposed. Exhibit C, the contract marketing and customer support plan. Respondent must provide a plan that describes the respondent's ability and strategy for promoting and supporting the contract if awarded. Next slide, please. Then moving on, Exhibit D, as I mentioned previously, is the itemized price sheet. And respondent must submit specific pricing for the products and services requested. The respondent must respond as instructed in Exhibit D, titled the itemized price sheet. Then Exhibit E, the vendor references. Respondent must send the Exhibit E reference form to a minimum of 3, that is a minimum of 3 companies or government agencies. References, and this is very important, but references must respond to DIR on the form provided by the due date in order to be considered for evaluation. Respondent may not submit the reference form to DIR. the people that you send these reference forms to should respond directly to us, which that is covered in greater detail in this exhibit. And then Exhibit F, the respondent release of liability for references. This form is required for all canceled contracts and must be provided to DIR with respondent's proposal response. Next slide, please. Exhibit G, the VPAT. The respondent must provide a completed voluntary product accessibility template for all commercial off-the-shelf, also known as COTS, products. Then Exhibit H, the PDAA or other accessibility exhibit. Respondent must complete the policy-driven adoption for accessibility for vendor self-assessment. And again, this is where you simply are self-assessing you as a company and where you are on the accessibility standards. Then Exhibit I, the historically underutilized business HSP form. Respondents must provide the HSP form as instructed in section 3.4.1 Hub Subcontracting Plan, item B of the RFO. Vendors must download the latest form to the link provided under item B. That's very important because you need to make sure you are using the most up-to-date link. Next slide, please. And then finally, Exhibit J, that is the EDGAR certification form. And respondents must provide the EDGAR certification form as requested, which is covered in section 3.6.1 federal requirements of this RFO. Next slide, please. All right, so the RFO scope. DIR intends to contract with qualified vendors to provide mobile digital video recording systems, accessories, and related services to create a contract vehicle that satisfies statewide procurement requirements for the mobile digital video recording systems, accessories, and related services, and also improves the efficiency of the procurement process by shortening the time required to procure the specified products and services. Customers will be allowed to utilize the products and services awarded in a contract, either individually or in any combination thereof, through the execution of a purchase order. And then also, the purpose of this RFO is to provide customers an effective way to provide high quality, evidence admissible video and audio recording of critical events such as traffic stops, criminal and surveillance activities, and public contacts. These systems may provide key metadata information such as high speed or GPS coordinates data. So these systems may be utilized in the following areas, but are certainly not limited to police cars, buses, and multiple passenger vans. And these are just a few examples. Next slide, please. All right, so to go in more detail, some examples of products and accessories that could be included, but are not limited to GPS, software, batteries, mounting hardware, cabling, storage capacity, add-on components, crash sensor interfaces, monitors, microphones. Next slide, please. Wireless transmitters and receivers, DVD or DVRs, chargers, flash card storage, and lastly, compatible cameras. And of course, this is just a list of some. There are many other things that that could be represented here as well. Next slide, please. All right, so now to cover some exclusions of this RFO. The included services include standalone hosted, and the following cloud services. So firstly, cloud infrastructure as a service, And this is the capacity to provide a consumer processing, storage, networks, and other fundamental computing resources where the consumer is able to deploy and run arbitrary software, which can include operating systems and applications. The consumer does not manage or control the underlying cloud infrastructure, but has control over the operating system, storage, deployed applications, and possibly limited control of select networking components. And then item B, cloud platform as a service. This is the capability to provide the consumer the ability to deploy onto the cloud infrastructure, consumer related or acquired applications created using programming language and tools supported by the provider. Next slide, please. And then item C, cloud brokerage. A cloud broker is an entity that manages the use, performance, and delivery of cloud services and negotiates relationships between cloud providers and cloud consumers. A cloud broker acts as the intermediary between consumer and provider and will help consumers through the complexity of cloud services and may also create value-added cloud services. And then item D, cloud assessment. The purpose of cloud assessment is to assist the organization in establishing a strategy and roadmap for moving applications to the cloud. Assessments enable the customer to identify candidates for cloud services, identify risk and benefits based on the set of criteria such as operational readiness, security, application characteristics, complexity, cost, and cost. The cloud assessment may be provided as a service or as a tool to be used by the customer or a combination. And we'll also like to note here, respondents may provide cloud services as a part of their RFO response. However, only if they are part of the total solution for information and data storage for the information gathered to be admissible as evidence. Next slide, please. All right, so now related services, I thought it was just important to cover this very, very briefly. So related services are any value add services that respondent may perform as related to the proposed products. Related services include, but are not limited to, product installation, warranty, maintenance, support, managed services, support of maintenance and support, and then managed services and product training. Any respondent offering product-related services must submit a description of these services and the related pricing in the pricing sheet. Next slide, please. So now I will turn this over to Teresa, and she will cover the hub subcontracting plan information in greater detail.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Williamson. We're going to talk about your hub subcontracting plan. Next slide, please. All vendors, hub and non-hub, are required to complete and sign an HSP to be submitted with your bid response. The link here is for the Comptroller's Office. The hub subcontracting plan is controlled by the Comptroller's Office. This is the link that you will need to visit to access the most current copy of your HSP. Next slide. Again, all respondents are required to submit an HSP. Failure to submit a completed and signed HSP will cause your response to be rejected. This is a pass or fail item. There are 3 ways to complete your HSP. You will either self-perform, meet or exceed the hub goal and complete method A, or not meet the hub goal and complete method B. Next slide. The hub goal for this RFO is 21.1%. If your proposed subcontracting meets or exceeds this 21.1% hub goal, you'll complete method A. Be sure to identify all hub and non-hub vendors that you'll be subcontracting with. Include the anticipated dollar amounts and expected percentages. So you will complete sections 1, 2, 4, and method A, attachment A. Please do not forget to sign and date your section 4. Next slide. If you are subcontracting below the hub goal, you'll complete method B. Be sure to solicit a minimum of 3 hub certified companies and 2 minority trade organizations. You must allow them 7 working days to respond to you prior to the due date of this RFO. Include your outreach for these entities with your HSP submission. You'll need to complete sections 1, 2, 4 in the method B, attachment B. You'll also include, just like on your method A, your approximate dollar amounts and percentages, including your hub and non-hub vendors that you'll be subcontracting with. Next slide. If you will not be subcontracting and you'll be self-performing your contract, you will complete sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. In your self-performing justification, you will identify how your company will fulfill its contract with its own staff, equipment, and resources. Please do not say we'll subcontract in the future or if we need to. Just tell us how you plan to self-perform. Next slide. This is my contact information along with the hub department. Please do remember that your HSP is a pass or fail item in your response for this bid. We will provide you a precursory review of your HSP. We're here to support you in completing that form correctly. Please reach out to us, either to myself or to the DIR hub box, or your resource in completing this document. But also please allow yourself enough time to make corrections if you need to. If you've chosen the wrong method, if you need to update to that method B, remember that you have those 7 business days that you have to allow for them to respond. That's all I have. Thank you so much. Next slide. I'm turning it back over to Scott.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Appreciate that. So next slide, we're going to cover Exhibit D, the product and service pricing in greater detail. So respondents must submit pricing on DIR's automated pricing form in the Bidstamp VIS. Failure to respond as instructed may result in respondent's offer being disqualified from further evaluation. So first item, respondents must submit the discounts of the offerings on the automated price form in Bidstamp. I'm sorry, in the Bidstamp VIS by selecting a Create Pricing Form button. So the automated pricing form. The products shall be categorized as provided on the sample Exhibit D spreadsheet titled Pricing Sheet. Please note, only products shall be included on this automated pricing form in the Bidstamp VIS. No services shall be included. Respondents must offer only 1 discount for each product category listed as applicable to the respondent's offering. Respondents may bid on any of the product categories listed on the Exhibit D pricing sheet. And then moving on, the discount for each product category will be applied to all products within the product category to determine the net DIR customer price. With the exception of volume discounts, all product category discounts must be entered into DIR's automated pricing form in the Bidstamp VIS. Next slide, please. So the product discount ranges and averages will not be accepted. The price to the DIR customer shall include all shipping and handling fees. So now to cover in greater detail the fields on the Bidstamp automated pricing form. And they include product category, simply enter the product family or product category of the proposed brand, for example, monitors, then product subcategory. If the product category has different subcategories, please provide examples. And then next, brand name, and then brand name. The example is Sony. And one note to note here, brand name must be submitted as spelled in the general marketplace. Then moving on, product description, please enter the full description of the product. And then part number, if providing detailed line item, enter the manufacturer part number or SKU number. If not, please simply enter NA for non-applicable. And then the next field, manufacturer, check if the respondent is the manufacturer. There's a checkbox. And reseller, likewise, check the box if the vendor is an authorized reseller of the proposed products. Then the MSRP, that's pretty self-explainable, but it's the manufacturer's suggested retail price or list price. And then discount off MSRP or list price. Please provide discount for the detailed line item. Provide brand discount average for each brand. Next slide, please. And then for the purposes of this RFO, the following definitions will apply. And we kind of talked about this already, but the list price at which, or the price at which a product is usually sold to the public and for which a trade discount is computed by a respondent that is an authorized reseller or for a manufacturer. And then again, as we discussed in the previous slide, MSRP is the price of the product which the manufacturer simply recommends. All right, item number 2. This is the second requirement. Respondents must also upload the itemized price sheet Exhibit D in the Bitstamp VIS. So this is actually Exhibit D, filling some of those tabs out. And this must also be uploaded into the VIS as part of your response in the RFO response documents area. That's also very important. Exhibit D, which we'll cover in greater detail in a moment, but Exhibit D contains 5 tabs. First is instructions. The second is a product discount sheet. The third is the services discount sheet. 4, third-party products discount sheet, and 5 is a volume discount sheet. Enter the prices for each item your company would like to offer to DIR customers within the applicable tabs. For certain products, and this is what we talked about earlier, COTS, consumer off-the-shelf software, that use interfaces, as well as VPATs, ACR documents. These must also be included with the vendor's response proposal. And these are the accessibility exhibits G and H that we'll be covering in greater detail here shortly. Next slide, please. All right, so now to cover the itemized price sheet in a little bit greater detail. So elements required for the product discount sheet, this is tab number 2. These include brand, product category, service category, product description, the MSRP list price, and the DIR customer discount off of MSRP. Next slide, please. And then the elements required for the service discount sheet, which is also tab 3. These include the service name, service description, the part and or service number, again, the MSRP list price, unit of issue, the DIR customer discount off MSRP, and the DIR customer price. And the formula there at the bottom of the screen simply just gives you an idea and a breakdown of how the DIR customer price is formulated. It's obviously a calculation and a formula in the spreadsheet that's automatically calculated. But just to give you guys an idea, that is how it's calculated. Next slide, please. And then elements required for third-party discount sheet. This is tab number 4. This includes the brand, product category, product description, again, the MSRP list price, and once again, the DIR customer discount off of MSRP. Next slide, please. And the last tab, the elements required for the volume discount pricing. Obviously, you'll need to enter the type of volume by quantity. And then there's some examples to the right, 1 to 99 units, 1 to 500, and then 500 plus units. We also need to know the product category. And again, once again, the DIR discount off of the MSRP. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to go in a little bit greater detail and deeper dive of the attachments that are included to this RFO. So next slide, please. So attachment 1 is the sample contract for products and services. Attachment 2 is a standard terms and conditions for products and service contracts. Attachment 3 is the service agreement template. And then tab 4 is the master operating, I'm sorry, not tab 4, attachment 4 is a master operating lease agreement. Attachment 5 is the master lease agreement. And one thing I would like to note right here is a major precaution. Respondents' response may be disqualified if their exceptions are excessive. And this is in relation to attachment 2, the standard terms and conditions for products and services. This is what we refer to as our Appendix A. So if you're allowed to have exceptions, but sometimes it could be counted against you if you have an excessive amount of them. Next slide, please. So now I will turn this over to Stephanie Harrison, who is going to cover the electronic information and information resource accessibility slides that I referred to just a few moments ago.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. So the accessibility background is something that DIR is required to take a look at on every RFO that we put out. The Texas Government Code Chapter 2054, Subchapter M, has the rules behind EIR and what that requires. All vendors must provide this accessibility documentation to be considered a responsive vendor. These are on a pass-fail basis, and there is a disqualification for not submitting all of your appropriate documentation. So please pay attention, because this can cause you from moving forward if you don't submit your documentation in accordance with the statute. Next slide, please. So the Accessibility Conformance Report, the ARC, is required for all commercial products, which includes software, SaaS model under also software as a platform, infrastructure or other managed services and products that contain any user interface. The ARC is complete. Once it's completed, we call it a VPAT form, and that is one of your attached exhibits in your RFO packet. This is required for everybody that is submitting the products that fall into these categories. Please review that, and if your product is required to have a VPAT form submitted, make sure you submit that form and have it completed. These generally come from the manufacturer of the product. So if you are a reseller, you're going to need to collaborate with the manufacturer to get those VPAT forms completed. The policy-driven adoption for accessibility form, or PDAA, is required by every respondent, regardless of what you're proposing. This is the self-assessment of your organization's accessibility maturity. Not submitting a PDAA form will actually disqualify your entire response. So there are 3 documents that have to be submitted on every RFO, or you're disqualified before ever getting to evaluation. PDAA is one of those documents. Next slide, please. The VPAT form is one that is required for products. So this is a form, again, that will be completed by the manufacturer of that product. You can submit the VPAT form as an attachment. You can also, if you have links to the VPAT form on the manufacturer's website, you can combine that information as requested in the RFO and submit the links to that. So it's important that the VPAT form is completed by an individual that has relevant knowledge of the product's accessibility. So they need to know actually how the product works, how it interfaces, be able to answer the questions. There's a lot of very specific product questions in there, which is why we generally, those are generally completed by the manufacturer of the product. This should be based on accessibility testing results and their supporting documentation. As a part of the VPAT review, our accessibility coordinator may reach back out to you to ask for that supporting documentation and or any clarification on those documents. These are scored on a pass-fail basis. So until those are complete, we may or may not be able to move forward in your award process. So please be responsive whenever we're asking for additional information to complete this mandatory review. Next slide, please. Your Exhibit H, this is the one that's required by every vendor, regardless of what you're proposing. This is your own self-assessment for your company and your accessibility and how you're meeting accessibility requirements, and it really scores the maturity level of your accessibility process. This one is, you need to fill it out to the best of your ability, and if you have questions on your PDAA form, you are able to work through part of that, but you need to plan accordingly and make sure that you make your best effort on completing this form. Not submitting a PDAA form will disqualify your entire response. So this is a required form. You can use the, there's some guidance on the internet on how to kind of complete these forms. If you've never completed one before, you can use the results once you've completed this form to track your progress as to how your agency is actually complying with the accessibility requirements as you're moving forward and as your company develops and as your products that you're selling kind of evolve over time. So it's a good tool to utilize to ensure that you all as a entity are meeting the accessibility requirements for selling the offerings to our customers. This form is part of an Excel spreadsheet. Please keep it in that format whenever you submit the form in our vendor bid stamp portal. Changing the format of that form, a lot of vendors will PDF it. What tends to happen is that'll truncate your form and we're missing information. Because this can actually disqualify you from the process, we want to see what you submitted in its entirety and without having to go back and forth and try to piece all of that together. So if you submit it in the Excel form, we should get every tab, every piece of information that you've input into the system instead of converting it to PDF. PDF files tend to not capture all the information that you input, and it doesn't look like you've met the requirements for that submission requirement. So please keep it in an Excel file. Next slide, please. Here are the resources for your accessibility. The EIR accessibility website, there's the documentation, there's the links to the forms. These are the most recent forms that you can utilize. There are some FAQs available on the website. There is some instructions on how to complete these forms. That additional information tab has the list of all the references and resources that you can utilize for your accessibility documentation. Next slide, please. If you have questions, we do allow you to contact our statewide digital accessibility office. That point of contact is Marie Cohen. Marie's information is listed here on the slide. You will get a copy of these slides, so you'll have it. You are allowed to contact her with questions only about your accessibility documentation, not about anything else related to the RFO. Next slide, please. General information and bid submittal. So how do you get your response to us? Please take notes and pay attention to how this is going to work. So general information. When you're submitting your questions through the bid stamp portal, and I'll walk you through how to do that here in a minute. You want to reference the RFO section that you're referring to with the page number so we can best address your questions. During this webinar, you can submit your questions at any time using the question tab. Those will also be addressed. The formal answers will come out in the addendum, but we can address some of those today. You're going to want to check the ESBD, the Electronic State Business Daily, for updates to the RFO. That's where we will post all the addendums. We do not send out notifications when the addendums are posted, so it is up there to the responsibility of each vendor to go and check the Electronic State Business Daily for that. All questions for this RFO must be submitted in writing through the Bitstamp Vendor Information System portal by the due date listed in the RFO, which is currently set at December 23rd, 5 p.m. Central Time. Next slide, please. Let's see. Scott, did you want to cover this part or do you want me to keep going?
I can cover this part if you want, however you want to do it. I'm fine either way.
All right, take it back over.
Okay. All right. So this part of general information, disqualification of offers. This includes failure to sign the respondent information form Exhibit A, which I spoke about earlier. It's very important to sign that. If you don't, you will be disqualified. Failure to complete the financial information, providing the DUNS number. That's also a disqualification. Failure to complete the historically underutilized business, also known as HS or HUB form, and the subcontracting plan, HSP. Submitting these documents is also a disqualification. And then moving on, failure to complete and submit Exhibit D, the itemized price sheet. That's obviously going to be a disqualification. And then failure to submit on or before the due date and time is also going to be a major disqualification. And then this is also very, very important. Contact with DIR employees regarding this RFO other than the designated contacts can also be grounds for a disqualification. And then delivery of offers. Any vendor responding to this RFO must submit their pricing or must submit their response through the Bitstamp VIS. We spoke about that a few slides ago, but I just wanted to reiterate that as well, the importance of doing this. So next slide, please. And then respondents and all respondent representatives shall not attempt to discuss the contents of this RFO with any employees or representatives of DIR other than the designated contacts. Failure to observe this restriction may result in disqualification of any related response. And I realize we mentioned that a slide ago, but that is very, very important to adhere to that policy. So we like to emphasize that. And to go in greater detail about the contacts with this RFO. So contacts for inquiries regarding this RFO, that would be myself, and this is my contact information with my email address. And then contacts for the following related topics: the vendor information system VIS portal Bitstamp, that would be Stephanie. And then the hub subcontracting plan portion would be Teresa. And those are their email addresses. So these are the only individuals that you could have in contact with throughout this process, and it has to be associated with those certain areas. Next slide, please. Okay, bid submittal. All right, any respondent responding to this RFO must submit the response through the Bitstamp vendor information system. Before users can access any of the Bitstamp VIS portal functionality, they will be required to provide login credentials to access a new or existing account. Vendors access the Bitstamp VIS portal via this link here, and this is also in the RFO. and they will enter their access credentials. If a vendor does not have login credentials, the vendor will need to request one by clicking on "Are you a vendor?" and "Need to request an account." This will be a link in the VIS at the login screen. And or it's a button. I'm sorry, it's a button that's located on the login page. Yes. And then you may view a video of how to set up your Bitstamp account at the below link. Next slide, please. Persons with disabilities who seek accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, in responding to the solicitation may contact DIR at any point of contact in section 3.1 of this solicitation. Please allow at least 5 business days for a response. Next slide, please. All right, Stephanie, do you want to start covering this area again?
Yes. So how do you get your bid to us? We have a online portal. It is called the Bitstamp or Vendor Information System that you do need to set up credentials for in order to submit your bid. So please do not wait till the last minute in order to do this. To get there, you're going to go to the DIR website, go to Information for Vendors, and then you're going to go to Selling through DIR, and you can kind of go through this with me if you're on a computer. Next slide, please. When you get to the Selling through DIR, you scroll down to where it says Schedule of Solicitation Opportunities. Click on that, and then next slide, please. And then that will take you to the Bitstamp online solicitation portal section. So our Bitstamp, if you have submitted previously, you already have an account. If you forgot your password, you can click on the forgot password and we can reset that for you. But if you have not ever submitted a RFO response to DIR, you'll need to request access to that and set up an account. There is a tutorial on how to set up an account. We're not going to cover that here because there's already a video online along with references and training materials on how to set up your Bitstamp account. What we're going to do is kind of walk through what you do once you're inside the account to get your information to us. So next slide. You'll click on that and you get to the Bitstamp vendor login page. Enter your username and the password that you used to set up the account. If you had somebody that's previously set up the account and they left your agency and it was linked to their personal email, you may need to request access to that, and we can help you get changed and get the individuals added to that account that need to be added to that account. Next slide, please. Once you're in your Bitstamp account, you'll get a screen that looks similar to this. It shows my account, open solicitations, and my responses. That is Bitstamp. The vendor information about DIR and contact DIR actually takes you back out to the DIR website and out of Bitstamp, the vendor information system portal. Next slide, please. You're going to click on the open solicitations. Next slide. And this will take you to a page that shows everything that is currently available for responding to under DIR. Currently, we have 2 RFOs that are posted out there for co-op. The one that you're going to click on for this particular RFO is going to be DIR-CPO-TMP-566. That is for the mobile digital. For this purposes, we just kind of have a demo walkthrough. So once you click on that number, next slide, please. It'll take you to the page for that RFO. And so this page gives like information for the RFO. It has the date it was posted. It'll have the Q&A submission deadline. It has the date and time that the responses are due. That's very important because that is a 2 p.m. Central Standard Time that they're due. 2:01, you will, even if you're in the portal, you will not be able to submit at that time. The portal will not allow you to submit after 2:00 p.m. on the due date. The vendor conference due date will be there, and then we will have, once we update and go into evaluation, that number actually updates, or the date actually updates in Bitstamp as well. You'll see down here, it has the RFO questions. These are the questions that your entity submits us. It will keep a running list of what you've submitted. It's not a running list of everything that's been submitted, but you can submit questions through Bitstamp, and we do encourage you to submit your questions there. And then they populate on our end where we can get to them and answer them in an addendum. It won't be like a live back and forth, so you won't get a response back when you submit a question. All questions will be accumulated, and then those formal responses will be provided in the form of an addendum by the time that we have in our solicitation schedule, and those will be posted to the Electronic State Business Daily. Next slide, please. So I'll go back one, please. At the top there, you have those 4 buttons. There's the response to solicitation, ask a question, subscribe to solicitation, and then view solicitation documents. And then we'll go over what those mean on the next slide. Next slide, please. So respond to solicitation. Once you've responded to that solicitation you're clicked in, that button changes to view response. This is where you create a new response or view response that you already have in progress. It'll allow you to resume your progress on an existing RFO response. Ask a question. You can submit your questions there through the DI, through that button. Please remember that we are requiring you to submit the page in the section that you're referencing in the RFO for your questions, so we can answer that question appropriately. That section will be available up through the submission deadline for the Q&A. Once that deadline's passed, you can't submit questions to the portal anymore. Subscribe to solicitation allows you to receive notifications on that solicitation. So you can subscribe to solicitation, and you'll receive a very general high-level notifications on the solicitation that we push out through the Bitstamp portal. This is where you do get your addendum notifications if you subscribe to that solicitation. So once we do send an addendum or post an addendum to ESBD, we will go in and put out a push notification through VIS to everybody who is responding to and has enabled receive notifications on their account. You'll receive that email notification that an addendum has been posted. The last button on there is view solicitation documents. That takes you to the Electronic State Business Daily, where the official documents for the RFO are posted. Next slide, please. Okay, on this particular slide, this is one that's kind of like your cheat sheet for how to navigate your response and submit to your proposal to us. This is how you get your information from your computer over to our system. These buttons at the top here that are in red are very important. Please pay attention. So the delete button is actually a delete. It deletes the information that's been uploaded to the response record before it's been submitted. Once you've submitted your response, if for some reason you change your mind and no longer want to be considered for that RFO, you need to use the withdraw button, and that takes your response away. Submit actually submits your entire response to us for consideration. The create pricing form is where you enter your pricing information for products. So your product pricing needs to go into the vendor information system through the portal as a line by line item. That's how we calculate who's providing the higher discounts, and that's where your pricing score comes from. Your service pricing and your itemized price list all still have to be submitted in your pricing exhibit. So you're going to do your pricing 2 ways. Your pricing form on your Bitstamp portal is for your products, and that the information goes in there, and it has very specific information that's asking for. And then you also will still submit the spreadsheet in its spreadsheet format as an attachment with your response. So that's 2 ways to submit your pricing, and they are there for 2 very distinct reasons. All of your RFO response documents need to be submitted through the portal. You can use the new RFO response documents and you just continue to add them till you have them all in there. It is highly encouraged that you double check and you label them accordingly. It's recommended to use the naming convention that is in the RFO as to how to name your documents, so you make sure that you have everything. You also want to be sure that you've named the document that you intended to name and uploaded that one. It's very sad when we have to disqualify a vendor because they think they've loaded their signed HSP and they didn't actually load their HSP at all, but they labeled one. So on your end, it looks like, well, I've submitted my HSP and we open the document and it's not the Hub Subcontracting Plan document at all. That is a disqualifier for not submitting that document. It does have to be signed, so that you need to submit a signed copy of that. The vendor reference button here, this sends out the reference form to the email addresses that you have on here. It doesn't track it, so you can send it through you can send it out through Bitstamp. You can also send it directly to your references by email. These are your customers that you've worked with before, given a reference on your behalf. But it doesn't track, so you're not going to know if it comes back to DIR or not. You don't know necessarily if they received it. It's just a courtesy option way to send out that form to your customers that you may want to complete that on your behalf. Next slide, please. Okay, back to you, Scott.
All righty, thank you, Stephanie. So now to cover some of the response content, this is section 3.8.4 of the RFO, actually titled the response files. So respondent must provide the items listed below. All right, so this is the first one is exhibit A. And for exhibit A, let's see, no exceptions to the signature. There are no exceptions to the signature on exhibit A. It must be submitted signed. If not, you will be disqualified. In addition to the required vendor certifications that must be acknowledged, that the signature basically attests the person signing the response has the authority to bind your agency to a contract with DIR, should your response be successful upon the completion of negotiations. And then also part of Exhibit A, which is attachment 1, is the canceled contracts, which we went in that, covered that briefly several slides ago. And then Exhibit B is the respondent history and experience. Exhibit C, the contract marketing and customer support plan. Exhibit D, we mentioned that one quite a bit, the itemized price sheet. Exhibit F, the references, which we must receive from the people that you have requested to send us reference information. Exhibit F, the respondent release of liability for reference. And then Exhibit G, the voluntary product accessibility template, also known as VPAT. Next slide, please. Exhibit H, the vendor accessibility policy assessment, also known again as the PDAA. It has been mentioned quite a bit. Exhibit I, the historically underutilized business subcontracting plan. Exhibit J, the EDGAR certification form. And also included in the mandatory response files or documents are the manufacturer letters for all brands proposed if you are the reseller, the software license and or service agreements if applicable, and then any exceptions requested to Exhibit A. Again, this is our standard terms and conditions, and these must be included in Exhibit A. I believe it's item number 13 of the vendor information form. or affirmative statement that respondent takes absolutely no exceptions. And then lastly, all signed addenda to the RFO. All these must be signed and submitted with your RFO response. Next slide, please. So rejection of responses. Section 3.9 of the RFO states the following. DIR has sole discretionary authority and reserves the right to reject any and all responses received as a result of this RFO. Responses that do not comply with the mandatory submission requirements will be rejected. In addition, DIR reserves the right to accept or reject in whole or part any responses submitted and to waive minor technicalities when in the best interest of the state. Next slide, please. All right, so before we take a break, I would like to go back one thing. Stephanie covered a lot of this, but I just want to reiterate this on the Bitstamp VIS portion because it's very, very important. So for one moment, I'd like to review this again with you real quickly. If you have previously created a Bitstamp account, you can use the same account. If you have not previously created the Bitstamp account or your account information has changed, for example, your email or business name, you will need to create a new account. Since this is not an automatic approval process, please be certain to allow 2 business days at a minimum for your account to be approved. This essentially means that you cannot wait until the day responses are due or the due date to try to set up your Bitstamp account. You will need to plan and make sure that you have received your login credentials prior to the due date of the RFO. Now, if you have not received your Bitstamp login credentials, please contact the point of contact listed in this RFO, which is myself. And the link on this slide, also the link on this slide will take you to a video on how to set up your Bitstamp account. Okay, so next we will be taking a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and answer any questions you might have. Please reference the RFO section number and page number with your submitted question. Questions answered today are unofficial until posted to the ESBD in the form of addendum. And please submit additional questions through the Bitstamp VIS after this solicitation conference. So now we'll take a 10-minute break and we will return back at 11:18.
All right, Scott, are we ready to get to questions?
Yes, sir. I am ready whenever you are.
Awesome. So just a reminder, if you do have a question, please drop that in the Q&A function, and we'll be happy to get to those questions. So it looks like the first question we have right now, it's the only one I'm seeing, is asking, will the PowerPoint presentation be made available to attendees? And it looked like Stephanie might have marked this as wanting to answer, but I don't know if that's just open for anyone to answer.
Yes, the PowerPoint will be made available to the attendees. It'll be included with an addendum to the ESBD posting.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. And there's currently no other questions.
So I guess we did a really good job if we have no other questions.
And Scott, I don't know if you want to go over the reminders. I went ahead and moved it to the next slide.
Beautiful. Thank you. And before I read this, as Stephanie mentioned a minute ago, if you do have, or as we also mentioned throughout the conference, if you do have other questions, please go into your Bitstamp VIS and post those questions there, and we will take care of those answers for you. So as a reminder, questions answered today are unofficial until posted on the Electronic State Business Daily in the form of an addendum, as Stephanie just mentioned. Any changes or additional information regarding this RFO will be posted as an addendum to requisition number DIR-CPO-TMP-566 on the ESBD. And again, that is the link to the ESBD site as well, the Electronic State Business Daily. It is also the responsibility of vendors to monitor the ESBD site for addenda. Next slide, please. So again, just to reiterate the anticipated RFO schedule, as we went over earlier, these are the dates. Obviously, the 23rd, that will be the due date that is a deadline for vendors submitting questions. The January 13th, again, that should be 2023. We'll get that corrected. So January 13th, 2023, 5 p.m. That's the estimated response date to receive answers to the questions from us. And then one of the most important dates here is January 31st, 2023 at 2 p.m. And again, this is the deadline for DIR to receive all vendor references from the folks that you have requested that send in references on your behalf. And then secondly, the deadline for submitting your RFO or your response to this RFO. And then February 1st is simply the beginning of the evaluation process and negotiations, and at some point the contract execution, and that will go on until the process is completed. And I believe that's all we have for you guys today. So in closing, again, all questions and inquiries must be directed to myself. Below is, or on the slide is my email address. Please email me, and I'll be happy to take care of any inquiries you might have. In terms of questions, again, please post that in the Bitstamp VIS system, and we will get those answers for you and post in the form of an addendum as quickly as we can. And let's see. Do you guys, Stephanie, is there anything else you would like to add before we close out?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate your interest in this RFO as well as DIR. And please reach out to me if you have any issues or problems that I need to help you with. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.